Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu filling in for Riz Khan. Zimbabwe, once the breadbasket of Africa, is now on the verge of becoming a failed state. Unemployment is over 80% and its currency is virtually worthless. There are no clean water supplies, and as a result, the country has now been hit by an outbreak of cholera, which has claimed almost 1,000 lives. According to the World Health Organization, thousands more are believed to be infected. Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe, however, says the epidemic has been contained and blames Britain for introducing the virus to Zimbabwe, which he says is part of a plot to oust him from power. At the United Nations, the United Kingdom and the United States are pushing to get Zimbabwe onto the Security Council agenda. On today's show, we ask, how long can Robert Mugabe cling to power? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE, enter the chat room and then take part. We also welcome your phone calls on the show. For the latest on the cholera epidemic, we're joined from Geneva by Dr. Riz Khan. She heads the Global Task Force on Cholera Control at the World Health Organization. For a political perspective, from London, we're joined by George Shearer, a Zimbabwean political analyst, and from New York, U.S. Ambassador Anthony Holmes joins us. He's a veteran diplomat and currently Cyrus Vance Fellow in Diplomatic Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to all of you.
Good, thank you.
Dr. Khan, let me start with you. The last bit of information we got from the World Health Organization indicates that up to 1,000 people have been killed by this cholera outbreak. What is the situation right now in Zimbabwe?
Yes, in fact, with regard to caseload, we have more than 18,000 cases reported so far, and as you mentioned, close to 1,000 deaths. We know also that this makes in fact a case fatality rate, which is quite high at 5.3%. And we know that 9 out of 10 provinces are affected, with 3 major hotspots, of which one is Harare suburbs. We have another one in Beitbridge in the south of Zimbabwe, and another one in Mudzi.
You were saying that 9 provinces out of 10 have now been affected. Does this mean that a large number of people in Zimbabwe are now susceptible to the disease?
Yes, for sure, because we know that the germ is present, and in the current conditions with very challenging water and sanitation situations, we know that, of course, the population is at high risk of getting more infected.
And how is the outbreak being treated right now? Are you able to get medicines into the area? Are you able to get clean water into the area?
Of course, the response is very challenging because it's a huge epidemic that we are facing, and this needs a very much coordinated and concerted approach amongst the different partners, and that's how, in fact, WHO has put in place coordination mechanism in Harare in order to coordinate the different partners together with the Ministry of Health. And we know that in big epidemics, this is the only way. We have to collaborate across sectors and amongst partners, and that's what's currently happening. And also supplies are being shipped in the country, and including chlorination material to make water safe.
Now, when you say that many parties need to work on this, on combating the disease in Zimbabwe, who are these parties? Who's involved in this?
Of course, the Ministry of Health is a key partner because they are the ones, in fact, in charge of responding to the epidemic. Then we have the UN sister agencies like UNICEF. And then we have also NGOs, and there are a lot of partners of NGOs, non-governmental organizations like MSF, Médecins du Monde, there is Merlin, and a lot of Save the Children, and a lot of other non-governmental organizations who are present and trying to combat currently the disease in Zimbabwe.
Dr. Khan, there have been a number of governments in neighboring countries who've expressed concern that this disease could spread into their countries as well. Is that a valid concern?
This is a very valid concern because we know that the germ knows no borders, and that in fact the germs don't need any visas to cross borders. And we know that the population is migrating and is going to neighboring countries, and of course that's how the bacteria can also be transported to neighboring countries.
And what is the outlook for the next few weeks? Do you think the disease will be contained?
We hope very much that we'll be able to contain the epidemic. But again, this needs a continued effort in ensuring that the population gets a proper access to health care, in ensuring that the population gets access to safe water and proper sanitation, and this needs a sustained effort by all the partners.
Okay, I want to move on to some of the political aspects of this case and what is going on in Zimbabwe right now. Anthony Holmes, I want to come to you first. There are many African leaders who say that Zimbabwe is now on its last legs. Do you believe that to be the case?
Well, there have been many people, outside observers, not necessarily African leaders, who have been saying that for the past 7 or 8 years. But the capacity of the Zimbabwean people to suffer and endure, and the capacity of Robert Mugabe, and particularly the senior military and intelligence leaders surrounding him who are continuing to prop him up to survive, is quite impressive, formidable. So I think we're not there yet. He's not at the point of collapsing, or necessarily at the point of collapsing. And I suspect it's going to take a real determined effort by the international community, led by his African neighbors, to actually get him to depart the scene. But we're not there yet. There's still some diplomacy and some pressure that's required before that would happen.
George Shearer, do you believe that to be the solution, that Robert Mugabe should be forced out of office through pressure from his neighbors?
No, I started from a completely different premise. It is really the responsibility to Zimbabwe. It is up to Zimbabwean people to find a solution to the crisis that they face. And as long as Robert Mugabe is leader of ZANU-PF, as long as Robert Mugabe is voted by Zimbabwean people, he will remain, as long as he wants to, he will remain the president of Zimbabwe. That's the first. The second thing is, there are two key words that we need to explore. One is assisting the people of Zimbabwe, which is very different from intervening in Zimbabwean affairs. As Zimbabwean government is sought and is being given assistance by its neighbors, assistance by the 53 heads of state of African Union, and indeed the international community through the UN has responded rightly to the humanitarian crisis. So this question of regime change actually turns people's attention away from giving the humanitarian aid that people of Zimbabwe need. So it's a completely different argument to make about whether or not Robert Mugabe should remain the head of state of Zimbabwe. That responsibility lies with Zimbabwean people themselves.
Well, I personally agree completely that the responsibility lies with the Zimbabwean people. I think that's what the Zimbabwean people thought they did on March 29th when they voted Robert Mugabe and ZANU-PF out of power, and Morgan Tsvangirai and his party, the MDC.
No.
The premise that the people haven't spoken is an invalid premise. It's now a question of the international community, led by the Africans, to decide how to respond to a situation in which the Zimbabwean people have been robbed of their right to change their own government legally through the ballot box.
Let's look at facts. The results of the 29th of March constitutionally did not give anybody an overall majority to become president. That's what you mean. At a parliamentary level, what you have is a hung parliament, no different from what it was 2005. It's perhaps an interesting comparator will be the Ghana elections that have just taken place, where you have a runoff. Now, Morgan Tsvangirai could have decided on his own to withdraw from the second. Why did you have to ask him? For all intentions or purposes, had he stayed in the race, he may have won. So the result people keep on talking about is not logical. The second thing is the SADC and African Union recognize precisely both the outcome of the 29th and the June elections of the presidential. These are not stupid people. These are people who are on the ground, who are there. So let's not misrepresent stuff. The political settlement deal of the 15th of September recognizes Robert Mugabe as head of state and head of government. Nobody forced either the MDC or anybody else to sign up to that position. So this question of trying to delegitimize what the Zimbabwean people said on the 29th of March is uncalled for. That's not the question. The real issue is how Zimbabwean people, Zimbabwean political leadership, deals with the crisis that they are facing. And the political deal settlement of the 15th of September is the best hope for Zimbabweans, for the region, for the African Union. Now, the question we have to ask is, what is standing in its way? And clearly, opinion within Zimbabwe and within the region says that Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDCT seem to be singing the tune that is called in London and Washington, as opposed to opinion and advice that is emerging from within Zimbabwe, from within the region.
But George Shearer, you're saying London and Washington. We're also hearing that from leaders in Africa, from neighboring states around Zimbabwe.
No, that's not true. That's also not true, because there are two. Africa is made out of 53 heads of state, yes? And the question, the two people who have raised concerns are Prime Minister Odinga in his personal capacity, because the government of Kenya has said quite categorically that this is not the Kenyan government position, and the same applies in Botswana, where exactly the same scenario has taken place. Of course, people individually are entitled to make their comments, but we cannot say 2 out of 53 constitutes a growing number of African political leadership. In fact, it's the opposite.
Okay, we're going to have to...
Unfortunately, however, if you continue with this line of logic, you end up with a starving, dying of cholera Zimbabwean population, because nothing changes
not at all.
In political reality.
There is no connection. Look, there is no connection between making sense of what people are saying, what heads of government are saying, and the plight of people who are hungry, which is real. The point I'm making is that politicizing the aid humanitarian process means people are turning their attention away from assisting people into a political scenario, which is really, quite frankly, is the business of Zimbabwean people themselves.
Okay, we're going to...
Excuse me, Dr. Shearer.
Excuse me, Ambassador Holmes,
Ambassador
Holmes, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that in a moment. We're going to have to take a short break right now. We'll have more of our discussion of Zimbabwe in a moment. And as we take that break, let me remind you that you can join this conversation with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room. You can see the debate taking place there right now. We'll be right back in a moment.